All right. And we're live now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first talk in the Dance Talk series. I'm Oliver Ferschke from Carnegie Mellon University, and I'm the co-director of Dance. And I'm here with Carolyn Rosé from CMU, who initiated this working group. And of course, with our speakers for today, Piotr Mitros, who is the chief scientist at edX, and his colleagues Leslie Gerhardt, product manager at edX, and Ed Batchel, the software architect and community manager at edX. So a few words about dance before we go into the actual topic of the day. We founded the Dance Working Group last fall to bring people with different backgrounds together who are interested in fostering discussion-based and social learning in online courses. In particular, we set ourselves the goal to extend the open edX platform, a MOOC platform, with discussion affordances for natural collaborative exchange, hence the name DANCE, which means discussion affordances for natural collaborative exchange. We already had a productive meeting with a large number of dance partners earlier this year, and we are about to begin with the development of our first system next week already. More information about that and the possibility to join this working group can be found on our website at dance.cs.cmu.edu. Today, Piotr and his colleagues will be talking about social learning in edX, which is exactly what we want to drive forward with this working group. And in the course of this talk, we will hear about the past, the present of edX, and where we as interested researchers and developers could help to improve this platform in the future. If you're watching this video live in a Google Hangout, you can use the Q&A bar on the top right. There should be an icon to open this bar to ask questions during the talk, and we will then get back to these questions after the presentation and discuss them with our speakers. So before I hand over to the speakers, to Piotr in the beginning, I will give Carolyn the chance to say hello, who started this whole initiative. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, welcome all to our first talk in this online talk series. I just wanted to point out that if you go to the dance site that Oliver has given the URL for, you can get to our Facebook page and also our Google groups and our Twitter account, and these will give you opportunities to interact with us and others who are part of this working group. We're very interested in collecting as much ideas and different perspectives from a wide variety of people as we can. So far, it seems that we have about 40 different institutions represented among our working group members from at least 10 different countries, and so we're happy to have so many people contributing ideas to the effort. But we'd love to hear from more people who have their own ideas, because ultimately what we are hoping for is that the extensions that we add to the platform will be usable by the community at large, and that's really our goal. And that's why we're happy to partner with the edX open source community, because we want to make everything that we develop open and available.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. So without further ado, I will hand over the virtual mic to Piotr. Hello, Piotr. Thanks for doing this talk today.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about, as the inaugural dance talk, our goal is basically to ground the discussion in where we currently are, some of the places that we're going, and how to contribute. So this talk is specifically about social learning in edX. We want to talk about the broader MOOC community, especially CMOOCs that came before us, which are almost entirely social. We'll sort of start with an overview of who we are. I'm Piotr Mitros. I'm the chief scientist of edX and one of the co-founders of the initiative. Leslie is the product manager in charge of teaching and learning, and Ned is the open source community manager. So in sort of that context, we'll talk a little about edX. I'll describe some of the experiments we've done in social to date, From there, Leslie will pick up with some of the things that we're doing right now from a product end. And finally, Ned will talk a little about how to get involved. And all of these talks will be at a very high level. Our goal is to give an idea of basically what's going on and give enough resources that from there, if you choose to do so, you can do deep dives on any specific topic. So this will be sort of going through many topics very quickly. As I talk, do feel free if folks want to ask questions or interrupt as any of us talk, but I think we will try to keep the talk reasonably short and then have a sort of discussion at the end that hopefully some of the talk organizers can drive. So to start off, I'll ground a little bit in what edX is, since it's often a little bit misunderstood. We're often viewed as a MOOC provider. MOOCs are about 1/3 of what we do. We have a three-pronged mission where one prong is improving quality. That's primarily residential education, and we're used by thousands of students residentially with very large benefits to student learning and student outcomes. We do have an education at scale component, which is where MOOCs fit in, but that's only one part of our at scale component. We also have initiatives with countries, partnerships with Saudi Arabia, France, Jordan, Mexico, China, many others, to impact the educational systems of those countries in different ways. And the third prong is research. Given Sorry, lost audio for a moment. Given the focus of dance, we'll primarily focus on education at scale and specifically MOOCs in this talk. So there are very innovative things being done with social learning in, for example, how edX is used in chemistry at MIT, projects like this. Those will be out of scope for this talk. So where we started, I guess now 3.5 years ago, was with a course in circuits and electronics. I'm sort of going to go through some of the experiments we did chronologically, which is why I'm starting here. And that course had a few social components. One of the components, we had an IRC channel. And for those not familiar with it, IRC is a way that people can chat. It came about almost 3 decades ago at this point. And it requires some technical sophistication, so not all students participate in this, but it actually worked very well. We had, I think, a bit over 100,000, under 200,000 students register for the course. We had about, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 students finish the course. And with that number of students, we had a pretty good participation in the IRC channel, basically 24/7. On average, students would say something to the channel about once per minute, and because it was an international course, that really happened around the clock. You could go in at any point, ask a question, students would answer. At the same time, it wasn't overwhelming. So one was the sort of chat component. A second was community question and answering. Community question and answering, this was sort of, I guess, popularized by Stack Overflow. We used a Stack Overflow clone called AskBot, and the idea there is that if a student has a question, they can ask that question, and at that point, others can answer that question. But perhaps more importantly, if a student has a question, they can find if that question has already been asked. CQA systems have very powerful and good search tools, and so in most cases, a question has already been asked. You don't re-ask it. You go to the discussion around that question. And that's in fact what happened. Students, in terms of question answering, if a student asks a question, they would get an answer 90% of the time. The median time to answer was about 12 minutes, but students read about 300 times as many threads as they created. In most cases, when students had a question, they would find an existing thread, and if they didn't understand the answer, they would ask a follow-up. And the types of discussions that we had there were very in-depth. Because there were so many eyeballs per question, the answers were actually a good bit richer than what you would find from instructors in courses. And in addition to that, if something wasn't understood, students could ask follow-up questions. There was a discussion around these questions, and we know from the work of Derek Mueller, from Mickey Chi, that the sort of vicarious learning where you're watching a discussion around a problem you're having works extremely well for student learning. The third component that we had in the system was a wiki. And the wiki was a sort of mixed experiment. The first, there were pretty substantial successes. The wiki, we were hoping to construct basically a community-constructed textbook. We didn't get anything resembling that, but what we got was also very useful. We had a tremendous amount of participation, creating what were, in effect, very good course notes, a very nice reference. So that was the first set of social experiments we performed. That was around the time at which edX formed, and as edX formed, we moved a little bit from community question and answering into a more discussion forum format, which combined question and answering with other types of discussion. We also started doing a set of experiments around learner sourcing and instructor sourcing. So what that refers to, sorry, it seems to have somehow swapped slides. So what that refers to is having students and instructors, communities of them, actually contribute to course content in different ways. This is showing, can you see the mouse cursor? Yes, you can. So we had about, I guess, 6 of these experiments, and I'll talk about some of the more social ones and some of the more interesting ones. In one of them, we brought together a community of physics instructors around a course in physics education research. And in that course, this was a pilot, so we had about 30 students. We taught this course in physics education research, and students worked in groups to create physics assessments. There were about 6 groups. This is the sort of discussion that was happening around it. And this seemed to work pretty well for a pilot. We actually found that some of the affordances of the edX platform were a little limiting for group projects. Leslie, later on, will talk about some of the ways that we're working to address that. As a follow-up to this, we had a second project where we tried to get students to contribute assessments. And this was a much more complex project. Here we used the edX discussion forum. We brought together a community of 6 WQX students. We asked them to create assessments, but first we pre-screened students for some of our top alumni. Second of all, we gave them a training course in how to create good assessments. And third of all, we put in a strong community system where students would review each other's work and where instructors would review work. So I might, for example, look at a problem, give feedback to a student, and that student might give that same feedback to other students. And this actually worked spectacularly well. We had students contribute very complex assessments. I'll go back to the slide that's swapped out. The last place where we've been working on sort of experimental student contributions has been in terms of building out different types of intelligent tutoring systems and remediations and things like that. This follows a little bit of the community question answering system, but we've had places where if students answer a question correctly, they could contribute a hint for future students. We collect a pool of hints. The intelligent tutoring system community might call these bug messages, might call them. There's a number of terms for these. I like hints because it's simple, but there's a lot of controversy about what you should call these actually. But if a student gets a question wrong in the future, they get the same message, and that worked very well. We collected a pool of messages that was greater than what you would find in commercial systems, which cost millions of dollars to construct. In a different system, we had students contribute recommendations for future students. This was work done in conjunction with Daniel Lee from MIT. So as students are, for example, working in this case, this is from the introduction of a introductory computer science course, they could contribute links to relevant resources, or as they were working through problems, other links to resources. And this allowed remediations at a much lower level of scaffolding than something like a CQA system. So that's the sort of things that we've been doing in terms of research and social learning. And I think from there, I'll let Leslie talk a little bit about some of the things that we're building out right now.
All right, we're doing a little bit of screen sharing, shuffling, and meeting microphone shuffling, but I think we're good now. Hi, my name is Leslie Gerhat. I'm Product Manager of Teaching and Learning Tools here at edX. What I'm going to do in the next couple minutes is tell you a little bit about two specific items that we've enabled in the edX platform to encourage collaboration in learning experiences, and those are cohorts and teams. So first, to sort of motivate why we've created these two things before I tell you what they are, cohorts and teams really enable social learning experiences in edX courses by providing smaller, more personalized group opportunities within a larger course. So like Piotr mentioned earlier, one of the things that we're really focused on is not only sort of the larger MOOC scale type courses, but also blended and flipped classroom environments. And so the capabilities that we've built facilitate these smaller, more personalized group opportunities within courses of any size, whether or not you're talking about a MOOC with 100,000 students or a blended or flipped classroom with 250 students. So I'll spend just a few minutes talking about each of the features and telling you a little bit about the use cases that we've enabled with them and some of the functionality that we're making possible, as well as a few course teams that have either tried out the functionality or are actually working with us to design the functionality. So first I'll talk about cohorts. Cohorts, I put a definition up here. A cohort is a segmentation of learners within a course that shares the same course experience with their group of learners. They engage in the same content and communication as the rest of the learners in those groups, and they also engage in the wider community. So really what a cohort is meant to do is to take a large group of students and segment them down into a smaller group that then shares an entire course experience. So I'll talk a little bit about teams later, but this is different from sort of a shared learning experience where a group might come together for a short amount of time and complete one project. This is really bringing together a group of students that will share an entire learning experience, which enables a much richer experience with a course. Two specific use cases that we've seen work really well with our cohorts functionality are really enabling different types of student communities. So one is bringing together alumni of a university for greater engagement. We have one example that I'll talk about in a little bit around Columbia University really looking to engage their alumni in a different way than alumni newsletters or other traditional ways of engaging your university alumni community. And they offered a special cohort with some enhanced discussions and additional content to their alumni to really engage them a little bit more in the content for a very popular on-campus course. We've also seen cohorts work really well when they're used to provide enhanced support for teachers. So what we found in some edX courses is upwards of 30% of the enrollment in some high-profile edX courses are actually teachers taking the course to learn skills and knowledge that will enhance their in-person classrooms. For example, we have a biology course offered from MIT where a large population of the teachers in that group in that course are taking the course to learn different ways of presenting materials within their classroom to engage their students in a different way. So we can use cohorts to, again, bring together teachers that can engage in a private discussion, as well as the course team can give additional content such as lesson plans that allow teachers to directly apply the content that they're learning in the course to their in-person classroom. So again, one specific example that we had is for the alumni cohorts. Columbia University offered an alumni cohort within the Part 3 of their Civil War and Reconstruction course, which is a very popular on-campus course at Columbia. We have a couple quotes directly from Columbia alumni. One says, "I graduated in 1978, and I always regretted not taking the Civil War and Reconstruction course." And the fact that this MOOC was offered gave this student the chance to take this course with additional interaction from Eric Foner, the professor, that would have been impossible within a very large MOOC. But because this cohort was, I believe, around 50 people, the professor, Eric Foner, was able to provide a much more intimate setting, as referred to in the second quote, for alumni to get some special attention to their questions or their comments and engage in a much closer way than they would in the wider MOOC. So it really gave an opportunity to really engage these alumni in a unique opportunity that they may have missed out on when they were actually attending the university. So here are a few screenshots of the specific examples of functionality that we have for cohorts. So again, I've alluded to these, but we offer targeted content that can be delivered to learners in a cohort. For example, this might be a welcome message to alumni, welcoming them to the course, or it can be those lesson plans that I referred to for teachers. We've got segmented discussions that enable smaller, more personal conversations in specific discussion forums. So these are private. These allow, for example, just the alumni to have conversations that they might ordinarily not be comfortable having in a larger setting. And then instructor tools provide easy setup and administration of the cohort. So we want to make it as easy for instructors and staff to set up these cohorts as possible, so that this enables these smaller communities in a very low effort way. So that's cohorts. Next, I'll talk a little bit about teams, and I'll compare and contrast that with what cohorts is. So again, we'll start with a definition. So a team is a segmentation of learners within a course that shares a specific learning experience by engaging in a targeted project or activity for a limited time period. So the difference between this and cohorts, as you can probably tell from the definitions, is that teams come together not for the entire duration of a course and really get into an entire experience within a course with their team, but they really come together for a specific project or a specific activity, such as a study group, for a limited amount of time, and then they disband. So this is probably more traditional for, one of the ways that I think about this is a cohort can be thought about as a course section with maybe a TA that engages in sort of the larger lectures with other students, and a team is really that small group of 3 to 5 that's coming together for a final project. So again, teams enable group learning experiences. 2 specific examples that we have around this. One is learners can participate in group projects. So we're actually actively developing this functionality. Cohorts is a functionality that has been released, and you can get more information about that in the edX release notes. Teams is being developed right now and will probably be available for general availability at the end of this calendar year, 2015. But for teams, one of the partners that we're working really closely with is McGill University. McGill has a course called Social Learning for Social Impact that they're offering, and they're terming it a group MOOC. What the whole course is really based around these group projects that bring together students with similar interests to work together on a project that they hope can, their measure of success for these group projects is if one group in the course makes some sort of impact on the world with the work that they do in this course, that's a success. So what we're building enables students to find students with similar interests and really come together for a group project where they might produce a paper or a poster or even produce something real world that they can demonstrate to the rest of the teams in the course. Another example of a use case that you could use Teams for is learners can come together to form study groups for support, just like they would in an in-person course. They can come together, for example, to study for the midterm exam. They find people who are studying for the exam at the same time that they are. They come together for maybe a couple weeks, and then they disband after the midterm is completed. So within Teams, these are a couple screenshots of the functionality that we're building. These are wireframes, so they're not final. But some examples of functionality our learners can find and form teams with other learners with shared interests. We have built out what we call the learner profile, which is the ability for a learner to populate a profile with some information such as a profile picture, their location, their time zone, their language, and a statement of basically a statement of introduction. What are they interested in? What do they hope to learn? Anything that they'd like to share with other learners in the class. And then learners can use those profiles to find groups of people who have already formed teams that might be similar in interest to them and join a team with them. Each team has their own small group discussion area to enable communication both within teams, but these discussions are also open to the rest of the students within the course to read. They can't participate, but it allows a little bit of knowledge sharing while still enabling those small group discussions. And then in the future, we hope to integrate with third-party collaboration tools to really encourage collaboration. What we found is that in most cases, students are being really resourceful with the collaboration tools that they already use in their own lives, such as Facebook, Google Drive, Google Hangouts, Skype, all of those tools. And what we want to do is bring together within the edX platform some of these tools that are already being used in students' day-to-day lives and enable them to use them in the team setting. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you take away some information of the types of capabilities that are both available within the edX platform right now and that we're actively building around social learning. So now I'll hand it off to Ned, who will talk a little bit about how you can get involved.
Hi, so I'm Ned Batchelder. I am a software architect here at edX, and I currently am also managing the open source community. Let's see, I have to make these slides do their thing. Slides. Can you see those? Yes. Okay. So I have two quick goals today. One is to give you an overview of the interfaces that are available for extending OpenEdX, and then an even quicker overview of the process of extending OpenEdX. To talk about the interfaces first, I'll talk a little bit architecturally about how we represent a course within OpenEdX. Inside OpenEdX is a component architecture that we call XBlock. That's an API for you to build a component that can live in a course. Every course is built entirely of XBlocks, and the diagram here shows 6 components in a course. Of course, a real course would consist of hundreds of components. And by components, I mean every video, every HTML chunk, every problem, every social component that you want to embed in a course is represented as a single XBlock, and they nest together hierarchically, just like divs in HTML. So at the very top, there is a course XBlock, which contains section XBlocks, which contains subsection XBlocks, which eventually get down to the units that you can embed in Studio, which are also themselves XBlocks. And so I've got this diagram here where all the yellow boxes are XBlocks. If we zoom out a little bit, that course runs inside an application which implements what we call an XBlock runtime. And the runtime supplies those XBlocks with both the services they need to embed themselves into a larger application, services like translation and access to data, and the actual data itself. And then, so for instance, in the LMS is an XBlock runtime, and it provides services like user registration and progress tracking and grading and forums. The data storage, the LMS gets to decide how the data is going to be represented. One of the features of XBlock as an API is that you don't have to concern yourself with exactly how the data is stored. You can declare what types of data you need to store, and then the runtime that embeds the XBlock will decide how it actually wants to store it. The LMS, in OpenEdX, we've made the decision that course content is stored in Mongo, but student data is stored in a MySQL database. And all this is abstracted away by XBlocks. If we zoom out a little bit more, the LMS runtime is just one part of the entire LMS, which consists of all of this other services around your XBlock. You can see over here on the left it says cohorting. as Leslie was describing. So the LMS is a large application. XBlock is a way that you can extend the courseware within that application. Studio is yet another XBlock runtime. Courses are still XBlocks. Studio makes slightly different decisions about how to store data, but the Mongo database is shared with the LMS so that when you are authoring a course in Studio, you are still using XBlocks in order to do that work. So for instance, when you embed a video, it's the video XBlock that knows that it needs a YouTube URL from you in order to decide what video to actually display at runtime. When you edit in Studio, all of that content is stored into the Mongo database. When the course is played to students by the LMS, it uses that same Mongo database. So you're here listening to us because you're interested in extending OpenEdX to add some social component. You have an idea. How can you change things? There are 5 different ways that you can extend OpenEdX usefully. XBlock, which I've just described a little bit, LTI, JS input, OLX, and then for the truly hardcore, just modifying the core code. So XBlock, as I've already described, is our API for courseware components. And this is the most likely choice if you want to build a feature that will appear in a course so that students can interact with it. XBlock is the way to go. It's both the best supported and most abstract interface we've got for you, and it gives you direct access to the internals of courseware so that you can embed new interesting experiences in the courseware. It's designed for third-party devs. There's documentation at xblock.readthedocs.org, and a lot of people, both inside edX and outside, have been building XBlocks to extend what experiences are available in courseware. So the nitty-gritty details of an XBlock, it's actually a Python package that runs on the server. You implement a class that provides a number of things. You declare what kind of data you want to store. You implement Python views for presentation, which produce the HTML and CSS that will appear in the web browser when the student encounters your block. And then you write handlers for dealing with the user's input. So of course XBlocks can be interactive. So the circuit simulator that was in our very first course is an XBlock that can both store the circuit that the student is working on, present that circuit out to the browser, accept edits back from the student to change the circuit, and then also make assessments as to whether the circuit is correct and publish grades into the gradebook. The slogan for XBlock was that it's a web app, but one div at a time rather than a page or a site at a time. And we tried very hard to make it possible to reuse your existing assets and skills. So if you have any experience building a web application with HTML and CSS and JavaScript, then XBlocks should feel like a very slight detour for you rather than an entirely new technology to learn. Second way to extend OpenEdX is that we are an LTI consumer. So if you have an LTI component or want to write an LTI component, then you can embed that into an edX course. It's an external standard. We didn't write it. We're conforming to an existing standard so that we can interop with educational components from other ecosystems. It gives you a very loosely coupled integration. So if you're not familiar with LTI, it's not going to give you a very rich set of information about what's going on in the course. It will tell you in an anonymous way who the student is, and then you can report a grade back and display whatever content you want in the rectangle that you get in the web browser. The third way that you can extend OpenEdX is that we have a type of problem type called JS input, which stands for JavaScript input. And the idea here was that if you can build your interactive component in JavaScript, or if you already have one implemented in JavaScript, then this is a very lightweight API that lets you embed that component into a course and display it to a student. OLX is our XML representation of courses. It will not let you create a new interactive experience, but it could be a good way to move existing content into edX, OpenEdX, or to get content out of OpenEdX, or to get your hands on a course in an XML format so that you can manipulate it in some way and then import it back into OpenEdX. And last, the OpenEdX platform is entirely open source, so you have access to all of the code. If you want to, you can change nearly anything That is a daunting prospect, and if you can avoid it, I recommend that you do it a different way. There are not that many docs about the internals, but they are available. If you find that you need to do this, we'd be very interested to talk to you about what it is you're attempting, both so that we can help you get it done and so that we can start to consider how a pre-existing API could have made your job easier. So those are the 5 ways, basic ways to approach the technical change. Now let's say you build your idea and you want to get it contributed in so that other people can see your idea. The first thing is that if you build an XBlock, there's no need to contribute it to edX at all, because XBlocks are designed to be installed separately. So XBlocks do not have to become part of OpenEdX in order for you or any other OpenEdX site to use them. You can build an XBlock, you can publicize that XBlock to your friends, colleagues, the general public, whatever. They can choose to install your XBlock and you can run together. So there's no need to contribute that code back to edX. And by the way, that has licensing implications. You can build an XBlock that isn't even open source if you choose to, although of course we recommend that you do because we believe that open source is the best way to spread ideas and to collaborate with people to improve education around the world. If you want to contribute to core, that is, if you are making a change that needs to be in the core code and you want it to become part of the OpenEdX platform, by all means, come and talk to us. And the earlier you can start talking to us about your idea, both so that, for instance, Leslie can see how it fits into the existing roadmap or to the current designs, or to get ideas from the rest of the UX and product team about how best to design it. The sooner you can start talking to us, the better the collaboration will be. Once you've built your changes, once you've built your idea, you'll make a GitHub pull request to us. We will work with you to schedule a review of that code so that we can have domain experts here in edX helping to review that code to make sure meets the quality bar that we need. And eventually it will be merged in and you will have a contribution to OpenEdX. And we thank you in advance for that work that you're going to be doing. So that's a quick overview of the technical interfaces and the process. I have a question slide here, but I'm going to let Oliver manage the process of questions.
So there are actually sorry, repeat for a second. There are actually a few questions in chat which I think come from Carolyn. Some of them were already answered, some of them were not. And I'll sort of summarize because there's a lot of them, and then Carolyn can perhaps follow up. But XBlocks are independent packages. They can work with any edX install. In fact, they can work with Google Course Builder. I don't know the majority of that integration, but it worked when I last looked pretty okay. They can work in other systems. You just make a Python package that contains the XBlock, you install it, and at that point it's usable. In most cases, the approach that we've taken within edX is that if you want to take an XBlock and use it as a prototype in one course, there's a cursory code review that we do to make sure it doesn't take down our system, but not a very in-depth one. If we want to bring it into production for more than a prototype, or we want to use it on an ongoing basis in a course, basically as we scale out from an initial prototype, at that point we do a more in-depth review to make sure this production quality code has test cases and continues to work. Other OpenEdX instances can just install the XBlock with pip and run it with no involvement from edX. In terms of the social experiments that we've done in the past, some of those have been creating new XBlocks, and in fact there were a few fairly lightweight XBlocks that came up with those, and some of those are in my GitHub repo, some of them are in other GitHub repos, but a lot of them were actually very loose integrations. So for example, when you looked at Maker Physics, the course where physics instructors created assessments and learned about physics education research, that was done through Google Groups. And all that I had for that UX that I showed previously in my slide was an iframe with some static HTML that had the Google group for each of the course groups within that course. And so you can integrate with the edX platform. You can, in fact, do many things. Very many interesting social experiments were done with very loose integration in the way that traditional C-books would have done, where there's a group of technologies that you lump, so courseware in edX, this is in this piece, this is in that piece, and courses have certainly used tools ranging from Piazza to Askbot to others in their courses with relatively minimal integrations. And from there, I'll go back to Carolyn for questions which I think either of us can field.
Hi, so thank you very much, Piotr, Ned, and Leslie, for this interesting and broad overview. We got two questions from the audience. So one is more of a comment that I want to extend to you now. So first, Janwei Chang commented on the well, so I'll just read out the question. I like the tool to engage alums in learning. That's something that Leslie presented, and this reminds me of the model of tele-apprenticeship developed by Kevin O'Neill in the 90s. So this is more of a comment, not so much of a question, but maybe, Leslie, do you want to comment on this? Was there any connection when you developed this to this, this approach?
Sure. So, there wasn't. Sorry. Oliver, can you mute? So I wasn't aware of that research when we designed teams. I did look into a number of other different research projects that previous teams have done on group learning in courses, in particular online. I'd love to have a link to the item that you're referring to, so I can take a look.
All right, great. The next question is also for Leslie, I think. So Joe Bergner asked whether the small group discussion in Teams enables real-time discussion or only asynchronous discussion.
So natively, the Teams enables asynchronous communication. We are allowing team members to share things like Google Hangout links or Skype links that would enable them to have synchronous communication, but no synchronous communication built into the edX platform at this time.
There is actually one asynchronous communication tool, and that is Instant Hangouts, although it's not very widely used. It has issues with basically how it matches students.
All right, so is there maybe one follow-up question from my side? Is there any interest in integrating more synchronous discussions within the edX platform currently?
I think there is interest. I don't think there are many ongoing projects. There's a tentative project that, well, I think that the answer is there are not currently ongoing projects to do that.
But we'd be happy to work with any groups that were actively interested in working on that.
Yeah, that's good to know, because that's also one of the big interests of the dance working group in general. All right.
And I just want to make one point, that we should be clear that there's a difference between code that's running on edX.org and the work that edX.org does to add features to edX.org, and the Open edX platform, which is available as an open source project. So when you asked, is there any interest in adding synchronous communication tools to Open edX, I, as the community manager of Open edX, I will answer yes to any sentence of the form, is there any interest in adding blank to Open edX? So if you are interested in adding it to Open edX, then I am interested in helping you add it to Open edX. Now, whether that becomes a full-fledged feature that is available on edX.org is a separate question. edX.org is just one of the more than 100 sites that's running Open edX. And the set of features that are available on edX.org can be a subset of the features that are available in the platform. And my goal is to make it possible for anyone who's interested in experimenting with any technology for online education, making it possible for that person to do that experimentation on the Open edX platform.
And if you look into the community, you will find that there is a tremendous number of X blocks written for different edX open edX installs that are in fact not currently running on edX.org. We haven't, in many cases, even found out about them, but even where we haven't had the time to productize, advertise, document, and so on and so forth, many of those X blocks. So this is not just a fiction, this is a reality.
So, I guess as I'm sitting here and also having recently had a wide range of discussions at various workshops with interested parties, people who are either formally part of our group of dance partners or people who've just expressed interest in using what we hope to be able to produce and make available, I get the sense that people feel that they need more guidance in how to find available X blocks or however these things will be included in courses. Knowing what's available, knowing how to use them, having some design principles. And so we were sort of imagining that a direction we might go in would be to have sort of an Uber X block that can be configured, where the teacher or developer would have in one place a view of what the options are, can pick out the way that they want this type of interaction to go in their course, and also how they want it to be structured and scripted from the instructional side. So I'm just wondering what suggestions you have in terms of being able to make use of what you have piloted in the past. Do you see it as being a good idea to actually try to get a hold of all that code and make use of it in some way, or would you suggest that actually starting from scratch might be a neater path towards something that would meet your software standards for becoming part of the platform easier? And so, just in general, what would be your response to this direction?
So there have been a tremendous number of prototypes in the past. I talked about some of the ones that I built. Other people have built ones as well. Shanlip from Google built a very nice X block that, for example, you talked about synchronous discussion, where if a student is stuck at a problem, they can be connected to another student and chat. The not so nice thing about building off of code like that, or code from some of my repositories, is that it's in many cases not finished. It's a prototype. It's an early stage. The nice thing about building about it are two things. One is that you do learn from the mistakes of the people who came before you. In many cases, it took a few iterations to get there. The second one is that sort of many of the questions that you have, how do I actually get started? Where do I go? When you start with a piece of existing working code, those are already answered for you. So at the very least, I think it makes sense to talk to myself or talk to Ned or talk to all of us and figure out I'm trying to build X. Did something else come before? All of our email addresses, I think, are pretty public. We're on the edX code mailing list, and just shooting an email saying what came before, scheduling a hangout, that sort of thing. We're very happy to do that and walk you through, and then you can decide, great, I'd love to build off of this thing and extend it. It'll get me started. I just need to add test cases, make it accessible, whatever else is needed for production, versus, wow, that's a hack. I can learn nice pedagogical principles or scaling or whatever from it, but I don't want to work over that code, versus that's not worth looking at all. I'd say that's a sort of one-off decision, but it certainly makes sense to have that conversation.
And if I can just add the sort of tactical layer to that question, it's hard for me to imagine having one X block that somehow aggregates all of the social experiments. They seem too diverse, and I'm not even sure sort of what that experience would be like in a software component. We have a lot of work to do in the XBlock ecosystem to make it easier to find XBlocks, both in sort of a conceptual sense, and then actually when you're sitting in front of Studio, how can I grab an XBlock and put it into my course? Right now, what you have to do is you have to install that software into your server. Whoever it is that's running your server has to agree to run that code on that server. And once they do, and they've configured it properly, then inside Studio, you have that as an option. So when you go into Studio and you go to Advanced Components, in addition to whatever else might be there, now you have Carolyn's cool social XBlock there as a choice, and you can click it and then start configuring it in the course. We don't have a way for an instructional team using Studio to shop for XBlocks, to install them into the server. We've got to build all that up. In terms of knowing what's available, there is a wiki page on the edX platform wiki that we can make available in the notes for this video that lists XBlocks, but that is a community-maintained page. There are probably lots of people who have written interesting XBlocks who didn't know about that page or haven't bothered to update it. So we would love to have more of a, not a marketplace in the commercial sense, but a marketplace in the display your wares kind of sense for people to show off what they have done and make it available for other people. But we haven't gotten around to building that yet.
Just building off of what you had said, we've gone through and not built but designed sort of what XBlocks would look like for a large number of social paradigms: synchronous, asynchronous, peer instruction, think, pair, share. Obviously, we'll building ones around group projects. And the thing that's striking is just how different they are. In different disciplines, in different pedagogical paradigms, you have extremely different social experiences, and you really do want these from an architecture point of view. Maybe they'll share some components. Maybe there will be something like, we mentioned Google Instant Hangouts. If that talked to a component that peer stood it's based on whatever social XBlock, that would be a nice component to build from. But I think a single Uber XBlock or similar component, that would not be the best way to go. I think it would be extremely complicated to build, just given the diversity of things out there.
Okay, we should get to some of the questions from the audience. We received quite a few now, and there seems to be a lot of interest in the team and group formation functionality that is currently being built in edX. So one question from Nate, actually two questions, but I think they belong to each other. So the first question is, it appears that content groups can only be used at the unit level and not at the section level. And then Nate said, how would you allow or deny a cohort access to an entire section of a course and not just at the unit level of the course?
It's a great question. The idea for this, as we do many things, is build a small set of features that we can use to test out the functionality and then expand it in the future. So we started with enabling content groups to affect the visibility of the smallest set of pieces within a course in Studio, which is the component level. We do have plans to expand that in the future to units, sections, subsections, but that work isn't scheduled at this time. Piotr wanted to add something?
Oh, I was actually just suggesting that if there are differences, in many cases, there are differences as to Studio has a somewhat constrained level of what it allows. OLX has a much broader set. I'm not sure about how this is for cohorts, but certainly with our randomized control trials and a few of the other components, you end up with much more flexibility in terms of levels at which you can swap things around if you just author in OLX rather than Studio, or make the local change in OLX later on.
Yeah, definitely a possibility. If you do go that route, it's an unsupported functionality, so we haven't tested those cases, and we don't know whether or not those would work. So proceed at your own risk if you want to edit OLX such that you're controlling content groups at the section, subsection, or unit level.
Great, thank you. That sounds awesome. Another question regarding teams in edX was asked by Mathieu Pinard. Could a student be part of several teams at the same time in the same course, or is it a one-to-one connection? So does every student only have one team?
Yep, so we'll be releasing it such that each student only is a member of one team at a time. And then in the future, we'll open it up to more teams. That may change as we continue development to figure out whether or not we can easily support multiple teams at a time, but the idea is definitely to open it up to more teams in the future.
Great. A question about the profiles, which is related to teams in a way, because you need to have these profiles in order to form teams and form these groups. So we got two questions related to this issue. So let me just pull up this question so we can link it to the video. Dan Tao asked whether the profiles are supposed to be read by the instructor or by some TAs, so that teams could be formed, well, by the TAs in a way, or teams could be suggested by the TAs, or is there an automatic mechanism that is supposed to match people based on these profiles? Then there was a related comment about these profiles, whether they are restricted to a single course or whether they could be used across courses in the same edX instance.
Sure, I'll tackle the first question about how teams are formed. So right now, teams are entirely student-formed. Students are the one going in, browsing the teams that are available, and joining a team. There's nothing stopping professors or TAs from suggesting that a set of students joins a team. But what we really wanted to focus on was enabling and empowering students to form teams, as well as it's a lot of work, especially as you get up into your 300-person lecture classes, not even to mention a tens of thousands of person MOOC, for instructors and TAs to be responsible for forming those teams. So we really wanted to put the burden on the student, but in a very user-friendly way. So that's the first one. The second one about profile visibility. So it's a great question. Right now, our profiles are, you get one profile per. You get one profile on edX. So your profile is not at this time course specific. The information that you're sharing is for all of your edX courses. You do have the option to limit the visibility of items on your profile if you're at all worried about privacy or security, but you do share one profile for all courses.
I'll mention that if you don't want to share across courses, in one of my GitHub repos there is a prototype profile XBlock, which I have used in one or two prototype courses, which gives per course profiles. And you're certainly welcome to experiment that if you're doing research experiments. It's nowhere close to production quality code. Or you could build your own. For a few X.
Thank you. This is very exciting. So I think these profiles will allow many new applications for group building, or build the requirements for many applications with respect to a group formation and collaborative learning. One more question about how the about the feedback that you have received from instructors and developers so far. Have you received any feedback about what they'd like to be different about what's currently available in terms of social learning? This could be related to the profile issues in the team formation, but also about general aspects that you currently are developing. So.
Okay, we were just brainstorming out who would take this. So there's a lot of issues from developers that we've run into with regards to social learning. One of them is that we would like to share data across multiple XBlocks across an entire course, and we don't have a great way to do that. The XBlock data model doesn't support that, and that makes it hard to engineer specific social experiences. A second one that we are working on a little bit, but perhaps not as quickly as we would like, is notifications. Students need to be able to, if I need to talk to Ned needs to be informed that I need to talk to him. And XBlocks right now do not have a notification service. A third one is around student matching. We need some component that sits outside, parses all of the data we have around students, and then spits out Leslie and I are similar on these axes, different on these axes. We'd make a perfect pairing to talk about this physics problem. Ned and I are perfect to talk about that physics problem. Some service like that is something that we need to build, and there's a number of gaps like that that really need to be addressed in order to build rich social experiences that are core platform additions. We would be very open to having some of these come from the open source community. Otherwise, we're sort of gradually grinding through these one at a time as use cases come up. And I mentioned Shanlip's XBlock. The reason that didn't go into production was at the time XBlocks just weren't ready for it. Now they're closer to ready, but it does generally, when you try to do something that's deep and synchronous and peer students and whatever else, in cases like that, you almost always have to write at least small additions to the platform to say, hey, I need this additional little bit from Xbox, and for some of the more ambitious ones, make pretty large-scale platform extensions.
Thank you, Piotr. One question that I had when I heard about the social learning MOOC that Leslie presented earlier from McGill. She said after presenting this MOOC that there were plans of a deeper integration of existing social networks. So using the communication outlets and platforms that students already use for communication in edX. And to me that makes a lot of sense, because I think that's the way we are going, in a way of making these MOOCs more open and more like communities. But the question that I had, how are you dealing with analytics then? Are you able to capture the communication that happens on these platforms as well, or is it just an affordance for the students to communicate without being able to actually gain insights in this kind of communication?
Leslie, you want to take that?
Yep, so it's a great question. Right now, we of course don't get any data back from third-party tools that we use that we're thinking about integrating. We'll be able to know whether or not students are sort of clicking a link to get to these third-party tools, but we won't know any deeper interaction beyond that. Our rationale there is that it's much better for students to be able to use these tools and us to lose a little bit of analytics data than to prevent them from using these tools that they're going to use anyway. So it is sort of a give and take on the research side, but I think the benefit that we get is high enough that we want to make sure that we enable these affordances.
We actually originally started trying to put everything in the platform that students would do precisely so we collected data back, and I think it very quickly became obvious that that was a mistake. Courses are just too rich for us to build all of that in-house.
Okay, just a quick side comment to the audience. So if anyone listening to this discussion or watching the video has any idea what should be developed in the future, feel free to add this as a question as well, or comment in our Google group on that's linked to the DANCE website. And again, the URL is dance.cs.cmu.edu. Okay, do we have more questions? I don't see any new question in the Q&A sidebar. Carolyn, maybe you have come up with another discussion topic.
Yeah, ooh, okay, good. So I had appreciated the feedback on from the developer side. What are the extensions that are needed in order to push the work forward? But I guess I had a question similarly from the student side. So when students give their post-course survey results, in the courses where these social experiments have been done, what kind of feedback have you gotten from those students? Have they made suggestions about things that they would have liked to have been different? Which things were they most excited about? Yeah, what did you feel like you learned from the student perspective from those experiments?
It depends on the experiment. In the context of the first ones that I spoke about in 6.02x, students were extremely happy, both with AskBot, with IRC, with most of the things that happened. with some of the more recent ones where we did group projects by integrating things like try to use edX discussion forums in order to have students create assessments, that worked okay. It didn't work nearly as well as a tool designed for that. When we did the physics instructor course, we just found the technology wasn't ready for it. We really couldn't do small group projects like that without the types of tools that Leslie is building. And so, although the pilot was very successful pedagogically, there was a lot of benefit to it. We didn't scale that out because the technology just wasn't there yet. And I think that's some of the issues that Leslie is trying to address right now.
So, connected with the limitation of X blocks being able to communicate with one another within the same course, I was wondering if it's a solution to have some external server or even just files that get written from an X block and then read by another X block. Is that a way of working around it, or is there no way to have communication between what's in an X block and something outside of it?
So that's definitely a way to work around the situation, right? You can have your external server, which can be a hub for communication among components, and you can store state there. Essentially, that's what's happening when you use an LTI component, right? The LTI component has to be hosted someplace else, and then you can do whatever you want there, so long as you get enough information back from the Open edX LMS to do what you need to do. The limitation of XBlocks today is not a fundamental architectural limitation that we're going to keep in place. We would love to add more capabilities to XBlocks so that they were richer and more capable of doing what we needed to do. So for instance, Piotr mentioned that there's no notification mechanism now. We're actually building that notification mechanism, and it will be available in the next quarter or so. So we are definitely interested in building out XBlocks so that it is a rich enough environment to do all of these experiments. Certainly there are workarounds like standing up a server someplace else to manage the communication and the data storage that we don't yet offer. But we want to hear from you about the limitations you're bumping up against so that we can start planning out the extensions of the API.
So I'll actually phrase that in a slightly different way. You can do one of two things. You can either hack around the limitations, or you can contribute back to XBlocks. And it's not clear to me that the XBlocks codebase is fairly clean. It's not clear to me that hacking around it will be a lot faster than doing the same work with an XBlocks. You need an XBlocks service that does X. You can build it yourself externally, or you can build it for XBlocks. The advantage of building with an XBlocks is, one, it benefits many more people, and two, at that point, it's there, it's supported the long term. The reason why we created XBlocks versus something like LTI is at some point your research runs out. XBlocks we can host. We host the XBlocks runtime. You had a service there, it's there forever, so it has, it's well written, it has test cases, whatever else. You write an XBlock, we get host that. You talk to an instructor and say, hey, use my experiment in your course. One of the key questions is will this keep going? The instructor has their course running for the next decade. You're doing your research until you write your paper. The nice about writing as an XBlock and sort of, in a sense, self-contained is you don't need to continue to administer, maintain, whatever else your server, and it can just stay up there.
Okay, we received another question about the development process, how to give back to edX, given that the platform is changing. So the question was that given that what is available in edX is a moving target in a way, what advice do you have for developers who are developing resources? So let me see if I understand the question. So what advice do you have for us in developing resources that will ultimately synergize with what is there? So because the development process needs time, so the platform is changing at the same time, and how could we make sure that we can connect back to edX even though it has changed during the development time?
So we
So
have
we have
a few things.
a few things.
Actually, would you mind muting? Thank you. So we have a set of APIs that are pretty fixed. One of those are the existing Xflux APIs. We're adding new services to it, but the set of what you develop with Xflux is likely to work pretty well for a pretty long time. The set of APIs are as well developed. The same is true about OLX. We have a set of fixed APIs, and as much as things fit into those APIs, you have a pretty good guarantee of long-term support. Where they don't fit, if you can extend those APIs, if you say Xflux is almost there, we need to do a little bit of open source work to get it there, that's a great way to do it. If you want to do core platform work, then the best way to do that is to engage through Ned, if it's also researched on Ned and myself, and basically let us know what you're building. And then we can provide guidance on a one-off or many-off basis as to how to design this architecture so that it's compatible. Both Ned and I are on the Architects Council here. We're pretty familiar with what is happening. That's intentional. That is so that we can provide that kind of guidance and we can work together.
And you mentioned
that one of the reasons that the XBlock API doesn't yet have everything that everyone needs is because we've been purposefully conservative about what we put into it, because we know we intended it to be a very stable and long-lived API so that you could build to it and not worry about the rest of the platform. So that is an explicit goal of the XBlock API, is to be abstract and stable enough that it's going to last for a very long time.
And am I assuming right that this wiki that you mentioned earlier would be the place to also communicate what is already there in terms of software that has been developed, but also what the current ongoing plans are in terms of new XBlocks that are being developed? So in order to avoid this duplication of efforts across the edX developer community.
Yeah, so the best place to find out what people are working on now is the edX code mailing list. The wiki page that lists current XBlocks is not going to tell you what people are working on, and may not even be complete to tell you what has been completed. The mailing list is the best place to start having discussions. Or asking us and see if maybe we've heard of something, and we'll try to get people connected and talking on the mailing list.
Just one other thing I'll add is there is an OpenEdX portal now that you can get to from open.edx.org. Here we also publish the roadmap that internal edX developers are developing to. And we're starting to encourage more and more of our open source, our large open source partners to also publish a roadmap of the changes that they're planning to make to the platform. So we just updated our roadmap for this current quarter, the quarter ending in June. You should be able to see what features we're actively working on, and you can always reach out in the portal about those features. So that's another great place to see what internally to edX, what our developers and our product managers and our UX designers are working on right now.
Great. So it looks like we're really moving in the right direction of making edX and learning in edX more social. So before we are wrapping up this session, because we are out of questions from the audience and almost out of time, does anybody has anything to add to what we have covered so far? Anything, any loose ends that we have to? I think, Leslie, you're muted. Let me just unmute you. Oh, it doesn't work.
Or yeah, I could just repeat what you said, which is Leslie was just saying that we'll send out copies of the slides as well as links to some of the, I think, OpenEdX resources, which will be posted on the page near the talk. So if you do want to do deeper dives, we'll send those out to Carolyn in the next couple of days, and then just check back as soon as she's updated the page. It should be there. What I will also say is that we're all reasonably friendly people. We have a open source team that's dedicated to supporting the community. Part of my job is to help out the research community. Do feel free to reach out to us, talk to us. Don't feel like even if you're at the very early stages, don't feel like you come up with a finished, finalized proposal that's common in the academic community. Just talk to us. It's a great way to figure out what's going on, if there are relevant things. I think that the biggest criticism you will find is that we're sometimes a little bit slow to respond, especially if it's something big that requires like a pull request. But beyond that, the process works very well. We care about it. We hear about it a lot, so if we can help you out, just let us know. Shoot us an email. We'll schedule a hangout, we'll talk, or we'll respond by email or whatever makes sense in the context.
So you would say that the biggest don't would be just not to communicate for a developer, or are there any other recommendations you would give to developers or researchers what not to do when working on extending edX or improving social learning in edX? So any other don'ts that you would like to mention?
I think in terms of, I guess, expectations where they were mismatched. One is that we are supporting millions of learners. In order to launch something at least beyond the prototype stage, the code does have to be production ready. That means that it's testable, so it won't break as we make more changes to the platform. That means we care about things like internationalization and accessibility. And those things, none of those are actually all that hard. They sound a lot more intimidating than they actually are if you've never done them, but you have to be aware that that expectation is in place. You also have to be aware that as a commercial-ish entity, we're a not-for-profit, but we run with commercial software development processes. Things are done with sprint cycles, so sometimes you issue a pull request. What the organization has to do is put it into, it has to be project managed. And often what happens is it says it will be prioritized in the following sprint, which is 2 weeks away. And so sometimes there's a little bit of a delay like that. So that's the only place where we've really run into a little bit of an impedance mismatch, is the different expectation between how code is developed in academic development environments versus sort of production quality professional software engineering teams that are sometimes like giver expectations. Ned, do you want to take it from there?
The other thing that you'll have to keep in mind is that our timescales might be different. So working in an academic environment on a semester basis, there may be, you have a grad student who's building something and you'll get it done just in time for the end of the semester and you want to hand it to someone and be done with it. And we've got our own quarterly and bi-weekly sprint planning that we're trying to coordinate that with. And so there may be, we may be working at a much more stately pace than you would hope. And one of the reasons to start talking to us early is so that we can get that planning done earlier. And so, for instance, if we hear about you first when the code is done, there may be a month-long delay while we find the next spot in our schedule to work on it. Whereas if we hear about it before you start implementing, then we can coordinate our schedules so that we're more in sync all along the way.
What I will say is that at this point, I've worked with many researchers at MIT, and for the most part, one, there was an impedance mismatch in how people like to work between the two processes, and two, once the communication was in place and people understood what the processes were, the graduate students we worked with were actually very appreciative of the more industry-style processes because they found that they learned a lot from the process. The person who does accessibility at edX developed many of the standards for W3C. He came here directly from the W3C. We have some fantastic people on our UX team, and the ability to interact the code review process, those processes, students have generally found to be tremendously valuable learning experiences. Again, once they understood what those processes were, once the communication channels were in place.
Okay, I think this answers this question very well. Thank you. Since there was so much interest in these team formation and group formation efforts that Leslie mentioned, is there a way for interested researchers or instructors to get a walkthrough the current state of these affordances, or will this be made public in the future? So that they have to wait until then. So is there a way to get a demo right now?
Sure. So for cohorts is available right now in the edX platform. There's documentation available that's pretty comprehensive. I think I'll send out links to the documentation for both cohorts and profiles. Teams is under active development, so it's probably not worth sort of going through that particular functionality. I don't give individual demos due to time constraints, but if you'd like to schedule me for a second talk with this group, let me know.
Yeah, we'd love to have that. So we can talk about this offline, and then we will announce this on the same ways we announced the previous talks so far. Okay, any other comments about today's topic, social learning in edX, before we wrap up? So anybody interested in discussing this further could do so in our Google Groups, the Facebook group, or on the Google Plus page, and everything is linked on our website under Dance CSCMU Edu. And besides the two upcoming talks by Carolyn Rosé and Marcella Borge from Penn State, we already have other speakers lined up which we haven't scheduled yet. Among them Art Gracer and Chenmei Kulkarni from Stanford. And we will be announcing these talks once we have a fixed date, and we're planning on having one talk every 4 to 6 weeks. But we can schedule these demo sessions like the one we just talked about in between these major talks as well. So before we close, maybe I want to give the last words to Carolyn. Maybe you have something to.
Thank you. I just want to thank the edX team so much for their time. This has been extremely valuable. I know that many of our community members wanted to hear from you, to know more about what's happening at edX in this space, and also what your expectations are of us. And we're really excited about this collaboration. We're excited that we're just about to get started on our development, and we will do our best to stay in good communication with you so that we will be well coordinated and won't trespass on your scheduling constraints, because we totally understand about those things. So so thank you again, and yeah, let's stay in touch.
Also, thank you very much from my side. Anything you want to say to our audience before we close? Ned, Leslie, or Piotr? Any?
I guess we'll go one by one. No, thank you for having us, and I appreciate the time, and let us know how we can help.
I will just say that I am not an education person. I'm a software person, and the thing I am excited about Open edX is that I can do software so that all the rest of you can do education. So I'm really interested to see the experiments that you'll come up with. I tell people that if you look at edX.org now, and 5 years from now, we'll look back at what we're doing now, and we'll laugh that we thought this was the way to teach people online. And all of the things that are going to happen in those next 5 years are going to come from all of you. And we need to see those ideas in action and improve what we're doing. So I'm really looking forward to those kinds of ideas coming out.
So thank you for inviting us, Carolyn. I'm very excited to see what will come out of this initiative. edX is designed as a platform for improving quality of education, access to education, and research for education, and we're exactly that. We're a platform where, by design, we do some innovation in-house, but most of the innovation is really intended to come from the community, both our partners, the Open edX community, and so far that has worked out very well. It's a much larger community. It's one with, in many cases, much deeper knowledge, especially in this case around social learning. And so I think we're all very excited about this initiative, so thank you for organizing this, Carolyn, both the talk and the overall dance initiative.
All right. Thank you very much. And now we're at the end. And I hope that everyone watching this video today will also attend the next talk in June. And you can find the link already on the website. And we're sure to have an exciting discussion then as well. So I hope we will all stay in touch and see you soon. Bye.